Hey, welcome back to Guitar Discoveries. I'm Robert Cassard, and always love sharing fun tips, tricks, interesting instruments with you. Today, I want to focus on what I like to call the poor man's Martin. This is a Yamaha FG151 from the mid-70s. These are known as NIPPON GAKKI Yamahas. You might have heard that term, maybe not. I hadn't heard of it until maybe 10 years ago. When my friend Andrew Bush, who owns a recording studio called Grandma's Warehouse down in LA, he told me about these cool old Yamahas and how great they sound, how well they record, things like that. And at the time, I was looking around for a guitar that I could play live without really having to worry about it. So the timing seemed really good. Yamaha, the FG series, which stands for folk guitar, not surprisingly. There were quite a lot of these being produced in the 60s and 70s over in Japan. That's what the Nippon comes from, and Nippon Gakki. Nippon stands for Japan. And these guitars kind of had a reputation for high quality build, really good resonant woods, and of course they've aged really well also. So this particular one, I can thank my wife, Barra Waters, for this, because without telling me, she heard that conversation that I had with Andrew, and she must have contacted him and said, hey, who's your contact? Who has those guitars? And she ended up buying one of these for me for my birthday. This has to be back in 2007, something like that, maybe even 2006. And it turned out to be a really nice guitar. I was kind of stunned by it when I first played it, and that's how I felt because Andrew had a red label one. This one happens to be an orange label. I don't know if you can see that in there, too much shine, but there's an orange label. The key with these is you really need to look for that Nippon Gakki or made in Japan to make sure that you've really got one of these vintage items. The other thing you really need to be careful of is that Yamaha back in the day, some of these guitars have not aged particularly well because occasionally the necks were underset. And so there's a pretty easy way you can check on that by using a ruler. What you can do, or preferably a longer one than this is what I happen to have available. You lay the ruler along the top of the frets and slide it down to the bridge then, and ideally it'll lay flat against the frets, which this one does very nicely. And when you get down to the bridge, it'll ideally sit right up just on top of the bridge itself. Now in my case, it rises up just a little bit. And what that's an indicator of is that the neck is starting to bow this way, right? The set of the neck is actually, the angle is a little bit off. Fortunately, this one is not so off that it's a problem at all for me. It actually plays really nicely and it's able to be set up and things like that. So it's actually quite nice if you just listen to this. It's got a real clear ring to it. Quite a bit of upper mid-range. One of the things that's kind of cool about that is that it tends to cut through. It cuts through in mixes. It cuts through live, which can be really handy for an acoustic. Let me show you what this sounds like. It's easy to keep silent when you think that you're alone and only one. Watch your tongue, boy, leave that song unsung. It's easy to be mute, but it doesn't have to mean you're deaf and blind. Don't get sidelined and never be resigned. It's common ground we're walking on. Right before breaking dawn, I know I can find someone in the millions that I walk among. There's nothing that can't be redone by this wholly unified majority of one. So, like a Martin, this guitar has slightly stiff action. It doesn't really matter how close the strings are to the frets. It's going to feel a little bit stiff. And that's been true of other Nippon Gakki Yamahas that I've played that are kind of the same vintage. That's okay for me, and it's probably okay for you if your hand's in pretty good shape. You noticed I chose a song that was pretty much all bar chords because I wanted to show you that it is possible to play one of these just the way it is with a Martin, like a D28 or something like that. And you notice this really, it's designed a lot like a Martin flat top. This is probably modeled on a triple O, almost like it's between a triple O and a dreadnought. It's got an Azo spruce top, I believe is what they call this. That's a Japanese spruce. Mahogany back and sides. What else can I tell you? Rosewood fingerboard, rosewood bridge. And it's got that Yamaha headstock. Mine's a little bit scratched. It was when I got it. I have to say the machine heads on it are Yamaha machine heads, closed. And they have a really nice gearing ratio. They actually, you can really get this thing in tune very easily and with a lot of subtle distinctions. So, think about it. If you invest anywhere from, if you get really lucky, $100 up to $400 on a guitar like this, and you spend a little money on a professional setup so that it's really humming, I think you'll be very impressed with the tone. It really does remind me of a Martin D18 or D28. It's just in that kind of feel. It's got that kind of projection. I told you that I wanted to play this live, and so when my wife gave it to me, which was a killer surprise, she divulged to me, Robert, I got it for like $100. So it was a great price. And so I invested in getting a Fishman pickup. I think this one is a Fishman thin line undersaddle. And I had it installed by the Guitar Shoppe in Laguna Beach, California. They did a killer job. This thing just sounds great when it's plugged into a PA system. Very natural. I don't ever feel like it has that. There's a certain stringiness that kind of happens with certain types of pickups. This one sounds really natural. It really sounds like an acoustic guitar when you plug it in, which is a great thing. So once I got the pickup put in, I started using this when playing live. This was back in the days of a band that we had, that my wife and I had with Paul Manfredi and Steve Reed. We were called Soul Folk, and we played all over Southern California. I played this guitar probably 9 gigs out of 10 during that time. And I used to have people coming up to me and saying, that is a great sounding guitar. What is it? And they all just assumed it was a Martin. I think, you can't really tell from that headstock. It's kind of a neutral, bland headstock. There's a lot about this that you might say is a little bit bland. And actually that tends to work out really well. So just a quickie, let's talk a little bit about the different FG models, the Yamaha FGs from that era. You're going to hear people talk about green labels. You're going to talk about red labels. You talk about orange labels. Green labels, from what I understand, and I'm not an expert, but green labels were the earliest produced, and then the red labels soon followed after that. They very clearly will say Nippon Gakki on them, so you're going to want to look for that. Once we got to the orange labels, which is the mid-70s, apparently there were some that were being manufactured in Taiwan. There were some that were being manufactured in China. So kind of beware. Mine very clearly says made in Japan on it. It does say Nippon Gakki. It's very clear. So you're going to want to make sure it's a Japanese-made because they were the highest quality instruments from everything I've heard and everything I've seen and experienced. These apparently retailed for about $130 new. And guess what? In the mid-2000s, my wife was able to get this guitar for me for a little over $100. So it's just like the retail price was originally. A really good one of these from that vintage that is properly set up and really is a good player's instrument is going to sound really good, and it's probably going to cost somewhere between $200 and $400, which is a heck of a lot less than a vintage Martin, right? For someone who doesn't have the budget to invest in a Martin, which I didn't when I got this, I think it's a great option, and it gives you something that, from the standpoint of playing live or recording, really has that crisp, clean, good intonation, great upper mid-range that does cut through. So there's a lot of things. This is a really good guitar also when you play in open tunings, which I'm not going to force you to sit through right now as I retune. Let me play you something strummed so you can really hear how it responds to a more aggressive playing style. some old flat top he come, moving up slowly. He got juju eyeball, he won holy roller. He got head down to his knee. Got to be a joker, he just do what he please. He wear no shoe shine, he got toe jam football, he got monkey finger, he shoot Coca-Cola. He say, I know you, you know me. One thing I can tell you is you got to be free. Come together right now over me, over me, over me. You can hear I'm pounding this thing, really pounding it. It responds really well. It's got a little bit of that stringy kind of edge to it, kind of jumps out at you. You hear a little buzz every now and then, but most of the time it is pretty freaking clean. Find the right one, it's a killer deal. That's a real guitar discovery. So Poor Man's Martin, Yamaha Nippon Gakki series from the 60s, early to mid 70s. Some really good guitars for very reasonable prices. So glad you could join me today for Guitar Discoveries. Please subscribe. I have a lifetime of information kind of like this and other cool tips and tricks for guitarists that I'm going to be sharing. I really hope you'll join me on these discoveries because I'm having a heck of a lot of fun doing them. Thanks. I'm Robert Cassard.